So hi, everybody. Let's try that again. Hi, everybody. Okay. Or hola, I guess we should say, yes. My name is Angie Byron, or Web Chick. I work for Acquia in the office of the CTO, so Dries, the project founder, is my boss. And so I basically work full-time on big, important stuff for Drupal, and trying to make Drupal just kick ass as much as possible. I'm also on the Drupal Association as a board member, and I wrote the book Using Drupal, which is now updated to Drupal 7, so you should buy it, because we worked really hard on it and stuff. But it has stuff on like Drupal commerce and media and Workbench and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what I'm going to talk to you about today is Drupal 8. Kind of talking a little bit about the Drupal 8 timeline, as well as what's in store for Drupal 8, regardless if you're an end user or a site builder. We don't have any of those people. We're all developers, right? Yay! Okay, yeah. But anyway, all of these people, and then we'll also talk about how you can help. And some of you might be saying, what are you talking about? Why are we talking about Drupal 8 when I just barely got my sites going on Drupal 7? You know, that kind of thing. How many people are on Drupal 7? Oh, that's good. How many people are still stuck on Drupal 6? Yeah, yeah. How many stuck on Drupal 5? Oh, it's terrible. I'm sorry. Okay. So yes, we're working on Drupal 8 right now. But that's okay. It takes a while for us to do things, and we need to, work on it constantly. So I can talk a little bit about the Drupal 8 timeline, and therefore why it's important to talk about Drupal 8 right now. So in January of 2011, Drupal 7.0 was released. And when we released Drupal 7.0, we had 326 parties in 96 countries. Woo, parties! Yes, exactly. And then in March of 2011, we opened Drupal 8 for development, because we had a lot of parties, and it took us a while to recover from all the parties. And we also migrated from CVS to Git at that point, and so we wanted to get that all finished. On December 1st of 2012, there's going to be a feature freeze. So from now until then, what it means is that anything in Drupal that's ever really made you mad, or anything in Drupal that you're like, it would be so cool if it did this, this is the time to do it. Because once we get feature freeze, then we stop doing new features and we focus on bug fixes instead. Then there's a code freeze in February of 2013, and that's when we stop changing APIs. There's kind of like, we really locked down changes at that point. No more changes. And then finally, currently, we're hoping by DrupalCon Europe next year, so August of 2013, we can release Drupal 8.0. So the reason why I give this talk now is because that day is only about 6 months away. Ah! And so that means that it is time to kick ass on Drupal 8 right now. Woo! Babies! Anyone a fan of babies? Anyone think babies kind of smell funny? And all right. So a couple of disclaimers. One is that this stuff, all of the stuff I'm talking about, is very actively undergoing in development right now. So some of this stuff might be true today and might be completely false next week, but I do my best to try and pick that. And also, none of the stuff I'm talking about is actually going to happen unless somebody does it. These are all changes we have planned. These are all things that we'd like to do. But unless a lot of people help us, we're not going to actually get very far. So that's one thing. So as I go through and cover some of this stuff, watch for something that you're like, I would like to help with that. That's interesting to me, or that has business value for my business. And I'll cover later how you can get involved actively and help push these things forward. So one of the first things we did with Drupal 8 that's different is we set out these major initiatives. And each initiative has a leader, sort of a coordinator of that initiative, who is focused on areas like configuration management, web services, layouts, multilingual, and mobile. And there's a couple of other ones too. And the progress that we've made so far is essentially we know what we want to do, and we pretty much know how we want to do it, but now we're focused on implementation, actually getting it done. And so you can see some are further along than others. And so we'll just go through and cover what each of these areas are. So here are some of the proposed changes for for end users. So people that you build Drupal sites for. I call these people the victims of Drupal because they're stuck with whatever you give them and they have to use it while you go off and build the next big thing. So the first thing is mobile. This is a big focus for us in Drupal 8. Basically because we're trying to go after this opportunity. So this little blue dot is all of the Drupal sites that exist in the entire world. This bigger red dot is all of the content management system sites that exist in the entire world. So not just Drupal, but WordPress and blah, blah, blah. This is all sites that exist in the entire world, and then this is all of the people on the world with a cell phone or two, or a tablet, or an iPad, or any of those things. And so it's really important, given that this is going to happen over the next 5 years, that Drupal 8 really needs to be mobile ready out of the box, or we're going to fall behind the trends of the larger web. So some of the things that we're trying to solve is this. Ew. Yuck. Anybody try to look at a Drupal site on their cell phone and found that to be a nice experience? No. How about Drupal.org? Oh, I know. We're working on it. So right now, when you open up a stock Drupal 7 site in a mobile browser, you get this like ugly horizontal scroll bar down here. You know, and you have to like scroll the page and stuff like that. Also, our admin tools kind of are built for a desktop, a full window type of thing. So you see like the toolbar gets all smushy and really hard to read and stuff like that. So what we're looking to do is something more like this. So building our themes to be responsive layout so that they stretch and all that kind of stuff regardless of the size of the window. And then on the right side, this is like sort of like a mobile friendly toolbar kind of stuff. And essentially how it would work is it would do that. By default, if the screen size was small, but if the screen size were larger, it would expand out to the full toolbar we see today. Another huge focus for mobile is front-end performance. So essentially, when you load any old page in the browser, there is definitely some performance related to the back end of that, but a lot of it is related to the front end. So stuff like rendering CSS, downloading JavaScript, parsing the DOM and making that look pretty in your browser, all of that kind of stuff. And most of the request is actually the front-end performance. So one of the biggest things that you can do is improve the front-end performance of Drupal because that's going to make everything feel a lot snappier. So if you are aware of issues around this and you want to help us figure this out, that would be really good. John Elbin is the name of John Wilkins is the name of the initiative lead on this. You can see there's an issue tag you can follow with all of the mobile issues. There's a group on groups.drupal.org that focuses on mobile. There's an IRC channel to focus on mobile. And every other Wednesday, they meet in the IRC channel, and you can go and find out what there is to work on and help them out. Mobile! Woo! Now we have authoring experience improvements. So these are people trying to use Drupal who don't know how to build sites, but they're stuck with whatever you give them, and they're trying to figure out how to just make an article. That's all they want to do. And this is really frustrating for them because Drupal, out of the box anyway, it definitely was not built for these people at all. It was built for us. The problem is that increasingly, more and more of these people are behind the CMS choices of organizations because in the past, the techies like us, we were responsible for saying, we're going to use this CMS or this platform or this. But what's happened over time is we have done a bad job of picking things that work well for content editors. And so there's a lot of businesses that are starting to see this, and they're actually including the people who have to use the system every day in the choice of what CMS to use. And on this is a problem for us because we don't look very competitive at all without doing about 30 hours of elbow grease to put WYSIWYG module on and set up views and all this other kind of stuff. So this is actually an important problem for Drupal to solve. So Dries set out a time frame for authoring experience to happen. So sort of like an analysis, design, implementation phase. So what we're currently doing in the community is we're sort of like exploring what other content management systems are doing and pulling ideas from them. We're putting together prototypes for implementation to do testing on and stuff like that. And then basically from DrupalCon Munich on, we're going to focus on really getting that stuff hammered out in core as much as we can. So a couple of big initiatives happening around authoring experience is Boyan Summers and Yoroi and Jared Panchat put together this kind of revamped content creation page. So they've done a really good job of separating like the actual data that you have to fill out from the stuff that is actually like, these are just settings and you can fill them out or not. There's also some other nice stuff here, like you don't see all of the options there, and they've actually put the most important ones at the top so they're easily accessible. And then finally, there's a WYSIWYG editor there, which we really need to do in order to stay competitive with pretty much anything else out there. Spark is a project by Acquia, and what Spark is trying to do is basically innovate on these sort of authoring experience improvements, but in Contrib and in Drupal 7, so we can try out different approaches and see what works and what doesn't. And then once we get Spark to a place where it's sort of working, then we're hoping to propose the changes in Spark for Drupal 8. The first thing that we're focusing on is a feature called in-place editing, which is more or less true WYSIWYG. This is basically being able to look at a page on your site and then click at the thing you want to change and then actually change it right in line. And then save, and it's done. So you can go to that link and you can see a video that talks all about this. And you know, we have code up that you can try. It's still very, very rough, but you know, we're working on it. So. And by the way, Acquia is hiring people to work on Spark. So if like making Drupal's authoring experience kick ass sounds fun to you, please talk to me. How you can help? Boyan and Yoroi. Boyan is here, probably not here because it's early, but but he's here. They meet in the usability group, the usability channel, and every other Monday they have a powwow to get together and talk about what they're working on. Proposed changes for site builders. How many people would consider themselves a site builder? Somebody who like views views and content types. Okay, a few people. Cool. One is multilingual. Yay! So it's sort of like I18N in core, but better. That's sort of the general thing. Because right now, this is what it looks like to do multilingual on Drupal. So you've got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or so modules you need in order to do internationalized content. And then they sort of are all over the place in terms of whether they do sort of like interface translation or content translation or one of these other things. So the goal for Drupal 8 is to really streamline that radically and then include those tools out of the box in core so you don't need to go to Contrib and download a whole bunch of stuff, which would be great. It'd be very much easier. There was actually a sprint here at Dev Day, or well, just before Dev Days and probably currently upstairs. And there's something like, I don't know, 30 people here just hacking on this stuff. And it was really, really awesome. They made a lot of progress. But they still need help. So Gabor Hoishi is the lead for the multilingual initiative. And that's where they all get together and hang out. Blocks and layouts is the next one. This is also called Scotch. You know, Drupal people, they're funny. OK. So the problems that we're trying to solve here is, this is currently how Drupal pages are built. So you start with the content area, right? Whatever the menu path is pointing to, that's what you build, and you put that out on the page. And then you start decorating the content area with everything else that belongs on the page. So like the sidebar blocks, and then you push it through the theme, and the theme will add some things like the navigation and the, you know, the logo and stuff like that. So you really only have one layout in Drupal. It's just a little bendy, and I credit Earl Miles for that little quip. But yeah, so since the layout is built inside out, all of these other little things on the side, they have no context to know where they are. Like, they don't know that I'm on node/4, and this is a node ID, and it also is a article node, and therefore, you know, all this kind of stuff. They don't have that context because they're rendered in isolation. And we also have a problem where sidebar blocks can't be reused in multiple instances unless you use like the multi-block module. Basically, once you've stuck your user login block on the left sidebar, that's where it is on your site. You can't say on certain pages it's somewhere else. So the plan for Drupal 8 is to kind of invert the page creation workflow, so that you start with the overall page that you want to build, then get into the layout that you want to build, and then you get into the placement of blocks within those layouts, so that everything on the entire page has the full context of the request. And we're also planning to make each of these blocks render independently. So for example, content block, menu block, advert block, those will all load independently from each other, which means if something is kind of static and you don't need to show it very often, you can cache it for a day. But if something is like you need up-to-the-minute information, like it's a stock ticker or something like that, you can actually do a different caching strategy with that block only and have it be up to the minute and not cached, which is pretty cool for performance. It also is planning to unify this so that everything that you see on the page is a block. So as a themer, you can theme everything consistently. And as a site builder, you can move things around consistently because there's no special things, one-offs, which would be pretty good. We're not sure yet what the user interface is going to look like for this tool. There's a bunch of brainstorming going on in this issue, or in this discussion. So if you are a usability type of person and you want to chime in and help those guys sort of figure out a really good system for how this could all work, that would be wonderful. So the plan for Drupal 8 is sort of like panels in core, but a bit different because being built in core, it's going to remove a lot of the architectural limitations that panels currently has to do sort of somersaults and cartwheels to get happening. It's sort of like Page Manager in core. It's sort of like the plugin system from CTools in core. And then, content types, access, context, relationship, all of those types of things that go around that would all be in core out of the box so that you could use them. And there's some code in this sandbox, and actually the first step of this is the plugin system. And there's a patch in the core queue right now that needs review. So Chris Eclipse GC Vanderwater is the person leading this. And every Friday, all day in the Drupal Scotch channel, he's hanging out and waiting for people to help or chime in on different things. This is the one I'm the most excited about. Mother bleeping views and mother bleeping core. Yeah! Oh, you guys. Okay. Hangover. So the problems we're trying to solve with views in core, this is one of them. As I mentioned, Drupal 7 was released in January. It took about 13 months from January to January to like February, something like that, for Drupal 7 usage to eclipse Drupal 6 usage. So in other words, like you can see, pretty much nobody used Drupal 7 until around July, and then it slowly started creeping up after that. And then finally in February, that's when it's like, at this point, it's silly to build a site on Drupal 6 because Drupal 7 is like very stable and ready. What we would love to do, though, is shrink that time window quite a bit. Because it does no good if Drupal 8 is like the best thing ever if you can't actually use it to build a site. So that's very sad. Oh, what I just explained. Boop. OK. Another thing is the Snowman initiative. I don't know, has anyone heard of this thing? A couple people, yeah. The idea behind the Snowman initiative was, or is, right now when you install Drupal, what happens? Like, what's our onboarding process? What's the welcome to Drupal that we give people? It's basically a blank page that says you don't have any content yet. I mean, that's the welcome mat for Drupal. It's like, hi, you've installed Drupal and you don't have any content yet, damn you, kind of thing. So they thought, wouldn't it be great if Drupal actually did something out of the box and, just in a profile, so it's not like hard-coded, but showed an example of the things Drupal's capable of, as a demo content. And that makes a lot of sense. But what they found is that as soon as they tried to do anything, they hit a wall because, like, you can't even build an image gallery, for example, or like a list of events or something like that without the ability to build lists of things, which is what views does. So the great thing about views being in core is it will allow us to do stuff like this. It will also allow us to replace a lot of the admin screens that are currently hard-coded and pretty silly defaults to something flexible that can be modified on a per-site basis. So if you want your content overview screen to have, I don't know, a search box, because that's crazy, you could do that. If you wanted to have little thumbnails of the article, thing in the content listing, you could do that as well. If you wanted to add extra filters like who authored this content, you could do that as well. It'd be a couple of clicks away. So that's really exciting. The other thing that we'll do too is help us with API hardening. So we're planning to put all of these new systems into Drupal, like the plugin system, and also some other things I'll talk about later. But views is a great use case to make sure those APIs are actually solid, because most of the stuff in core is not that complex. And views definitely is more complex, it's very powerful. And so this will show that not only does it work for the simple cases, but it works for the advanced cases as well. So plan for Drupal 8 is that first of all, there's already sort of working code. Is that true, Earl? It's working less right now. But there's an 8.x branch, yeah. Excellent. Yeah, there was a whole pile of people here on Friday and yesterday working on this as well. So there's a lot of work going on with the 8.x branches of ctools and views, so they're actually somewhat usable right now. And the plan is to move major parts of ctools in core, so instead of having to download this other thing with all these great libraries, they'd just be in there out of the box. And then there's a lot of really nice patterns, UI patterns in the views interface, because it was designed after, well, basically like a year and a half after we we finished designing Drupal 7's interface. So things like drop buttons and things like the ability to fill out part of your form and then, oops, my browser closed, and then come back and have all your stuff there. The idea is moving more of those sort of UI patterns into core so they're available core-wide, and it's not this special one-off thing. So that's pretty exciting. And how you can help, of course, is download to the Views in Core initiative. And there's a donations box, as Pedro mentioned, right outside at registration. So if you've got some free, euro hanging around because you were drinking last night and all that, just feel free to chuck it in the box. It would be really helpful. Designers and front-end developers. Anyone here classify themselves as that? No. So you don't care about this stuff at all. All right. HTML5? Yay! So Drupal 8, as we speak, outputs native HTML5 by default, including form elements. So there's form API form elements for these new form elements like telephone, website, email, tickets. So when you fill out a form API structure somewhat like that, you end up with a form something like that on an iPhone or something like that. So it's like, instead of you clicking into a number field and getting the full keyboard, it's smart and it knows, oh, I should only show you the digits because this is only allowing you to enter numbers. And this is just what the markup changes look like. That might not come through. It's not that important. But essentially, we no longer do XHTML. We now do doctype HTML. And then we have all this mobile meta tag stuff in there so that it knows to respond appropriately to the device size. We're also trying to do quite a bit on markup cleanup because our markup makes Jeffrey Zeldman cry, basically. Because it's like div, div, span, span, div, 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 some of that kind of stuff. So a lot of work was done by the people working on the HTML5 initiative to try and figure out, as long as we're converting this stuff to HTML5 anyway, let's figure out what we actually want it to look like in terms of our markup. And Jacine Rodriguez, Jacine Luisi has put together a set, sort of like templates. She calls them standard components. That's sort of like if you're a module developer or a core developer, sort of like, and you want to put together a structure like this, she has some example code to show you what a front-end developer would really like that to look like. Which is good, because I just saw that none of us are front-end developers, so it's really nice to have a cheat sheet like that. Another thing that's going on, we have yet to see if this will actually materialize or not, is Twig is it's a templating language. So in Drupal 7, region.tpl.php might look something like this, where you have PHP if $content, then print classes or whatever, and printing variables, printing render variables, that sort of thing. In Drupal 8, if we go with this Twig thing, we'll instead replace those with little brackety signs, so you don't actually have PHP in your templates. There is definitely some advantages to this approach. Security is much, much, much better. I don't think there's any custom theme on the entire world that is not vulnerable to XSS vulnerabilities. because people will throw out the default variables that Drupal gives them, and they'll print the raw values, and they forget to put check plain around them and stuff like that. So this would be great because it would solve that problem. It would also mean that your template files were editable in a tool like Dreamweaver or something like that. It also means that we have a true separation of our presentation logic from our business logic. So you do your logic to do the displays and whatever the override system is, but then in your presentation logic, it's just straight up printing loops and minor things like that. This is also an example of proudly found elsewhere. So Drupal has gotten a lot of crap for being not invented here, which means, I'm actually shocked we moved to Git, because if we just took nodes and revisions and we hit the diff module, we could kind of build Git in Drupal, So we didn't do that. So yeah, it's an example of kind of a trend we're trying to do in Drupal, which is look around at what other projects are doing and kind of steal the best ideas and incorporate them into our project, and then collaborate with the upstream providers of those projects to help them increase their performance and do other things. So it's pretty cool. And then finally, on a sadder note, we killed IE 6 and 7 support in Drupal 8. Yay! All right. Now to the fun stuff, right? Coders! Woo! Okay. So a warning to someone who's not a coder, which is nobody, but you never know, that things are about to get geeky. So the first initiative that affects coders is the Web Services Initiative, or the WSGI initiative, it's also called, which is sort of like services module in core, but better. The problem we're trying to solve with WSGI is this problem, that Drupal out of the box right now assumes that every time it serves a page, it's serving a fully themed HTML page to a desktop browser, right? Like menu execute active handler takes in a menu thing, and then it goes in, it parses through, calls the page callback, blah, 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 and then spits it through theme page and then ends the request. And if you don't want it to do that, you have to explicitly kill the request and then output JSON or something like that instead. So we have to break Drupal's assumptions there, which is not ideal. And it also means that you're bootstrapping the entirety of Drupal, so the form API and the theme system and all these other things, when all you want to do is display like 6K of JSON or something like that. So that's not ideal. So in the new world order, what we're trying to do in 8 is make it so that Drupal can be a centralized, basically a first-class REST server that can talk to many different kinds of devices across many different protocols. So for example, if you have an autocomplete field and you type the word A, and then it comes up with a list of all your usernames that start with the letter A or whatever, making it so that immediately, basically as soon as we can tell that it's JSON, is routes to completely different page workflow to say, here you go, that's just JSON. Don't bother loading the layout system. Don't bother loading the theme system and all this other kind of stuff, which is good. So the plan for Drupal 8 is actually to incorporate a lot of the Symfony project into our kernel and sort of underlying functionality. Anybody here familiar with Symfony? A couple of people. You're going to want to get familiar with Symfony by Drupal 8. You got plenty of time. It's like August of next year. Plenty of time. No. But Symfony is pretty cool because it's actually like a really modular framework, so you can pick and choose the components from Symfony that you want, and you don't need to take the whole thing. So parts of Symfony that we're taking are, for example, they have an HTTP kernel module, sort of, that essentially, it's based around the HTTP protocol, and it allows you to kind of stick to native HTTP to do all of your regular serving. So it can support things like, when a request comes in, it can tell what is the intended, content type it's trying to get, what parameters is doing a GET request or a POST request or this kind of thing, and then respond accordingly. And this gives us a global, or kind of a global request object, so that you have at any point in your cycle a place to store global context information to know what's going on within the page request. The impact on developers, the exact impact on people as module developers is not totally known at this point because it's very early. But expect at least hook menu to change pretty dramatically. Hook menu needs to at least take HTTP methods that it accepts, and then it also is going to sort of probably, instead of doing a page callback function, probably do a page callback object that could render out in different ways. So kind of stay tuned to this one. There's going to be a lot of cool stuff coming down the pipe. So that's Larry Garfield in the Whiskey, Issue, News, IRC, etc. This one I'm excited about, configuration management. So that's what you get if you try and move Node ID 4 from your dev server to Node ID 4 in your live server. Boom. Anyway. So this is sort of like the features module in core, except better. And the problem that we're trying to solve here is like, so everyone loves Drupal because you have these nice little admin forms and you click through and you save and you can make changes very easily. You don't even need to code, right? It's awesome. Except what happens to those clicky pointy things? They get stored in the database. And what you can't do is move your database from dev to live, because you're going to bring your content from dev to live, and that means that your node 4 that's just test, 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 test is going to destroy your nice welcome page that your front-end users are seeing. So we run into collisions because the database doesn't have a distinction between which properties in the database are configuration and which properties in the database are content. And there are all kinds of solutions to this problem, right? There's the features module, there's ctools exportables, there is, variable set, variable get, there's running update hooks, there's all kinds of ways that people deal with this. I personally do the napkin approach, which is where you write down admin, structure, menus, click this thing, save, blah, and then you do it twice, once on dev and once on production. Just kidding, okay. But the problem is this is all over the place. There's different ways of storing configuration depending on where it comes from, and there's no standard way of dealing with everything. And it's really, really hard. So the plan for Drupal 8 is to actually split the database and explicitly identify things that are configuration, and not only save them in the database. We call it an active store because it defaults to a database, but it could be like Redis or something like that. That's sort of the fast read optimized cache for this information, and then you can export it to files. When files, you can move around with Git or whatever version control system you're using, or FTP if you want to be old school, But when you go from prod to live, then you move the files whoop, over to production and then do an import operation to the active store. So you refresh the active store in production based on what the files are doing. So you can safely click around over here on your dev server, and when you click things around, they're going to be saved to files on disk. You commit them to version control, you move them over to your production site, and then once the files are looking the way you want them to, you refresh the active store and you have your new configuration. The other thing that's cool as part of this initiative is the content, and actually any entity, so content users, blah, 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 are getting these UUID, universally unique identifiers that will make it so that it's really easy to tell whether or not something is there on server A or server B. So you can move over all your content safely without overwriting it because it no longer uses the sequential IDs like 4, 5, 6 to do that. So Greg Dunlap is here. He's the initiative lead for this initiative, the configuration management system. These are all the details there, and they meet every other Tuesday. And there's been a lot of talk of CMI at this sprint as well. We had a huge powwow to try and figure out some remaining architectural issues and made some good progress. There's a lot of other stuff, a lot of proudly found elsewhere stuff, a lot of conversion of Drupal to object orientation. So if you are someone who enjoys object orientation and feels like that's how things ought to be done, Drupal 8 should look a lot better to you. So that's good. The entity API has been vastly improved. I don't know, I didn't have time to catch up on all the details, but like it's really nice. For example, in Drupal 7, really we only have the ability to load entities in core and then entity API modules like supplementing the rest of the CRUD capabilities. But in core, in Drupal 8, that's all built in. And a lot of other nice things too. We're also trying to make TestBot, our automated testing robot thing that does continuous integration of all our patches, much, much faster. There's a whole initiative on file and media API improvements that Thomas Svensson, I don't know if he's here, he was leading a sprint on that, and much, 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 much more. So if you want to look at all of the changes, you can go to that URL, and this is basically everything that we've changed from top to bottom. And it's quite a lot. So I'd love to give a hand to over 600 contributors who have contributed to Drupal 8 so far. And of course, we also want you. So here's my obligatory picture of scary clouds, okay? Because here's the thing. It's like we look at all these slides and we're like, wow, Drupal 8 sounds like it's awesome. Have fun with that. But the problem is that the people working on Drupal 8, they get burnt out when they feel like nobody cares about what they're working on. You know? They feel like they're working on the most important problems for Drupal, that this is the stuff that's going to carry Drupal forward for the next 5 or 10 years and make sure we all still have jobs in the future. And they feel like nobody cares, because it's the same people working on the stuff over and over and over again, and it's really hard to feel like that. So I would really, really encourage you to get involved. And a lot of people are scared to get involved because they say, well, you're a web chick, you know. Sure, you say it's easy to get involved, but so I want to do a little bit of Mythbusters here. So one of the common myths is that you have to be this smart to contribute to open source. How many people think that? Yeah, I totally thought that. I first installed Linux in 1995. This was back when Debian Linux fit on 7 floppy disks. Like, I don't think it fits on 7 double density HD DVDs anymore. It's like huge, you know, so 7 floppy disks, and I knew like all this stuff about open source, and I read everything I could get my hands on, and it took me a decade. It took me until 2005 to actually get involved in open source because I thought this was true. And then once I got involved in open source, I was like, wow, anyone could do this, and then I went crazy and kind of, I don't recommend going crazy, but this is really cool. So no, that is not true. A contributor is basically somebody who has 3 attributes, and that's it. They see something and they say, that's dumb. Then they say, I want to see that dumb thing fixed. And they also say, and I can do something about it. So you don't need to be a coder, you don't need to be any of those things, you just have to be someone who sees something that's dumb and wants to see it fixed and can do something about it. And do something might be funding views in core, or do something might be reviewing a patch, or do something might be, I don't know, lots of different things. But those are the people who power open source. Because if you see something that's dumb and you don't really care, you're not going to change anything, you know. Or if you see something that's dumb and you want to see it fixed, but you can't do anything about it, you're not going to be able to help either. A lot of people also think that this is how improvements are made in a project like Drupal. So this is where you get into fun cartoons that I drew in Keynote, so I apologize. So you start with Gina the genius, all right? Because obviously all core developers are geniuses, right? Never make mistakes. Never introduce security holes in their patches. Oh no, never. Funny story, my claim to fame is I introduced a security vulnerability in Drupal 6 that wasn't caught until Drupal 6.17. Yeah. And then they gave me the keys to Drupal 7. So anyway, so Gina the genius is over here. And she's a genius, so her head is like the size of a watermelon, right? Okay. And she's just, you know, doing something like some light reading, like, I don't know, astrophysics or something like that. And she's thinking to herself, you know, I have an idea. And so she whips out, you know, her little text editor in like a, you know, a swoosh of like, you know, brilliance. And of course it's Emacs, right? No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, so she's like typing in her text editor and she comes up with her idea, and then she says, there we go, what do you guys think of this? And everybody goes, wow, that's amazing, and that is your best work yet. How many people think that that's how open source happens? Because that is totally not how open source happens at all. This is how open source actually happens, okay? So you have Edwina, the end user, and she's really, really mad because she just hit a bug. And so she goes into the issue queue and posts a bug report. If the only thing you ever do in your Drupal contributing life is make a bug report that makes sense to other people, that is a really big contribution. Because so many people post things like, it's broke. It's like, that's nice? What do you mean? You know, that kind of thing. So bug reports, that's a good thing. And then you have Paula the programmer, and she hits the same bug. And she searches the issue queue and she says, oh, hey, look, it's a bug report. OK, that's great. I'm going to try and fix that. You know? So she codes and codes and codes, posts something, and marks it needs review. And then Tatiana, the tester, comes along, right? And she's got big Coke bottle glasses because she's a tester, you know, so, yeah. So she looks at Paula's patch and she goes, because it's not quite right, it doesn't, you know, conform to coding standards, it's like doing calls to the database in a theme function, whatever it's doing, you know, this kind of stuff. She's like, but that's cool, I'm gonna go post some feedback to help her make it better. And so she posts her feedback and she says, you know, this is all the stuff and marks the issue needs work. And Paula says, great, that's great feedback, I'm gonna roll the patch again and I'm gonna take 2. By the way, a lot of people are nervous to do this part, like being Tatiana the tester, where you look at someone's patch and you analyze it, you find problems, and you tell the person, I found problems with your patch, because they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings and they don't want to offend anyone, right? But if you're Paula the programmer and you post something needs review, the most demoralizing thing for you is not that somebody comes back to you and says your code has problems, it's that nobody frigging says anything to you. How many people have had a patch stuck in needs review for like 6 months? Yeah, that sucks, right? Wouldn't you much rather have feedback that somebody at least cared enough to look at your patch and, you know, it doesn't matter if you've had a, you know, a missing period somewhere. It's like, at least you cared enough to look. So please do that. But anyway, so she's like, bleh, great, thanks to, boom, and she marks it needs review again. And this will go back and forth for a while. And then, you know, near the end of its cycle, then you get Wendy the poor soul stuck on Windows XP. And you know what she's gonna say? You totally know what she's going to say. She's going to say, oh, it breaks in IE6. And the only reason that she's using Windows XP is because she's a book author. So she also says, and mind your spelling. You know. So she marks it, needs work again. And so, you know, Paula says, OK, great. I got my things again. Here's another one. Needs review. And now Tatiana comes back in and she says, oh, wow, that's much better. I'm going to go ahead and mark that reviewed and tested. And then it comes to someone like me or whoever the project, you know, maintainer is of a certain project, and then they go ahead and incorporate it or send it back to needs review. So what you see here is there's nobody in this equation that knows everything about this, right? Even Tatiana the tester didn't catch the spelling errors, and Tatiana the tester definitely doesn't run IE6. So, you know, it's like all of these people just contributed the little bit that they know, and together they made a really great improvement to Drupal. So you don't need to be someone who knows all of these things. You just need to be someone who pushes the ball forward a little bit and helps other people. And we really, really need more people to participate because this, oh, that doesn't come out well, but this is a big circle. If you can't see, it's a big, no, I'm just kidding. OK, so a big circle, and this represents all of the people who have downloaded Drupal. That tiny little red sliver in the circle represents the number of people who registered an account on Drupal.org. So there's a bunch of people who download and never register an account. Then there's a handful of people that register things. And then the sliver, which you can't even see because it doesn't show up, which is 0.05% of all of the user or all of the people who download Drupal, actually did something with their account. So they posted a forum support request, or they posted a patch, they committed a module, whatever. They did something with their account. That includes people, by the way, who spammed us about shoes. So like, there's really, really, really not that many people relative to the number of people who've used Drupal who actually push it forward. So we need more people to help out. Ergo, it is time to kick ass with Drupal 8. So if you're still nervous, here's how to start. So we have this process called core mentoring hours, which takes place twice a week. And this is a bunch of people on IRC ready to answer whatever stupid questions you have about contributing. So if you don't know how to get a Git environment set up, if you are looking for an issue to work on and you don't really know what you want to work on, they have lists of things to help you. If you want to know what's the most important thing to be working on right now for mobile, for example, they can help you with that. There's also then core win sprints, which happen every Friday. And those are where the initiative leads all coordinate with the organizers of that, and they say, this is what people should work on to push this initiative forward. And this is like basically an online code sprint every Friday. And so these are really great places to help. You can also come in anytime on IRC and Drupal contribute and talk to people like me or Sun or Earl or any of the people that you know from the Drupal community. We also have this page set up at community initiatives/Drupal core, which is pretty much the most important stuff for all the initiatives to be working on at any given time. So if you find yourself with a free weekend sometime, free weekend. Anyway, you can go here and you can help. So how many people are going to go immediately to the issue queue and help Drupal 8? Oh, come on. Yeah. All right, thanks everybody. I just want to give a couple of quick credits. Christoph de Jager or Swentel, Jen Lampton, Dries, Gabor, Larry all really helped me pull together this presentation, so thanks to them. And also thank all of you for showing up here. And are there any questions? And how am I for time, by the way? 2 past? Yes! Okay. I don't see Pedro. So I think I can take questions if anyone has any. So the question is, as a module author in Contrib, what's the expected impact that Drupal 8 will have on your migration from 7 to 8? Currently, it's hard to say, because currently not a lot. You need to ship your module with a YAML file that describes what configuration options you supply for the configuration management system. If you define any classes, those need to be put in a PSR0 friendly directory format, which is terrible. It's like lib Drupal blah blah blah. I forget what it is, but we no longer need to define things in the info file, like when you have classes. So that's cool. And PSR0 is like a lazy loading thing. So like instead of it loading everything into memory on every request, it can lazy load only the classes that it needs. So that's one big change. There's probably, though, way more changes coming down the pipe with the addition of the plugin system. So the plugin system is intending to make things like blocks, input formats, text formats, fields, cache backends, all this kind of stuff into plugins, which are basically object-oriented classes following a certain structure. So that would be another change. There is a module called Coder Upgrade, which is part of the Coder module, that at least from the 6 to 7 migration path had code in it to automate a lot of these changes. And I would guess that once Drupal 8 is closer to done, because right now it's not even remotely close to done, and it would be silly to write something to help now, because it's changing every day. But I would guess that once Drupal 8 sort of stabilizes a bit more, people will start funneling energy into that module to make it so that the stuff that can be automated, like taking this class, renaming the file, and moving it into this directory structure, could just be done with like a little drush script, probably. But I don't know. But those are the things that are true right now. Oh, and HTML5. So you need to, like, you don't need to. HTML5 is fully backwards compatible with XHTML. But often you'll want to make use of the new like form API elements and markup in your theme functions and stuff like that. You, though, are the author of the print module, correct? So you're special in that. So PSR0, yay, except one of the really stupid things that it does is, and I can't explain to you why this happens, but I'm going to get this wrong. But basically, if your module is named something that is a reserved PHP keyword, it fails all over itself. So like we have to rename the list module in core to something else because of this problem. And you are probably going to have to rename print module to something else. And I'm really sorry. Yes! Print PSR0 sucks. I would recommend that one. Yeah. But anyway, yes. So that's funny. I get to tell you this in person because I was going to write you an email about it and apologize, but now I can just and say I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. But those are the only two that I know of that that conflict. But nobody create an echo module between now and Drupal 8. Okay. Okay. Good question though. Any other questions? Or should I shut up? That was a non-committal thing. All right. 2 more questions. Yes. I didn't quite catch all of that. You said you thought Twig and Core was already a done deal? The library is committed to Core, but a lot of Symfony libraries are committed to Core. It remains to be seen whether or not we'll actually convert the template system to use it. And then you said, won't it create a lot more work for people to upgrade their modules? And the answer is yes. Yeah. Yeah. I am not totally up to speed because it keeps flipping back and forth. So sometimes they say they're going to offer both PHP template as like a legacy one and Twig, and then default to Twig, but if you still have PHP template, you can use it. Then other times they say they're dropping support for PHP template. So I'm not sure where it currently lies. I am going to be a strong proponent for offering both, even if PHP template's in contrib. Because there's just a lot of people with themes, obviously, and stuff like that. But in Drupal, we have a saying called the drop is always moving. And what that means is that we prioritize making the best architectural, performance, et cetera, decisions possible without caring for backwards compatibility of your code. We do care for your data. There's always an upgrade path, but we will make the best decision. And that is actually a good thing, despite the upgrade pain, because it allows Drupal to stay on top of these web trends that happen without having to have gobs and gobs of code to support legacy stuff we used to do 10 years ago. But you're right. It is definitely a headache for upgrading. But again, tools like Code or Upgrade can probably automate a lot of this stuff. Because I mean, if I could put the slide back up again, but really, it's just a matter of anything that's like $PHP, just change to brackety%. And anything that's print blah 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 is brackety variable name. So a lot of it doesn't change much at all, other than changing the syntax slightly. As long as you're not one of those people, none of us are one of those people that have like tpl.php files with like 7,000 line SQL queries in them. No, none of us would do that, no. So, yes, so we'll have to see, right? Because there is some momentum around that initiative, but it's still very early, and I'm not sure where we'll end up with Twig. But we always commit the library first in case we need it, because otherwise the patches get this big and it's impossible to review. So, yeah. And then, yes. So the way Symfony works is it's broken up into different components. And within the Drupal repository, we pull in components from Symfony so they're there in the download. And for now, while we're developing Drupal 8, we just chuck in anything that we think we might use. And then when we get into the after feature freeze and the code freeze thing, cleaning up stuff, then we'll just rip out the stuff that we're not actually using. So we're quick to commit things that we think are interesting and we might make use of. But it's not a guarantee that these things will actually get used. I don't know if that answers your question. Well, the fact that it is in core now means that the people working on the Twig and core initiative can now start rolling patches to change theme.inc to use those libraries instead of like the regular Drupal procedural stuff. And so it's more those people. So it's like Chicks and Jen Lampton and a few other people that are using it as a base for their work. Once they get a basic platform in that like incorporates a Twig, basically a Twig theme engine into core, then there would be a bunch of conversion stuff that could happen. Like, so you take your template files and convert them from one to one. But right now, nothing. It's just the library sitting there in the repository and nothing is using it at all. But that library was literally just committed on Thursday, maybe Friday. So, this is like up to the minute information. Yeah. One more? Okay. Oh, sure. So the question is, for the Spark inline editing feature, are we trying to roll our own or are we using other projects? We need to nail this down. There's currently like active discussion happening in the Spark issue queue around this problem, but it's about 99% sure we're going to go with an editor called Aloha, because Aloha editor can both do the like true WYSIWYG, like content editing, but can also then be on the back end like the full node form kind of thing where you don't have the visual context of the page, because the last thing we want to do is to put 2 WYSIWYG editors in core. That would be terrible. And so Aloha seems to be the only one that can work in both contexts. It also has a really nice plugin infrastructure. The downside of Aloha is it's enormous. It's like 97K or something compressed, or I don't know, it's terrible. But a lot of that is because it like has an entire library, I think it's XJS, included in it. And they're currently trying to refactor it so it uses jQuery instead, which would be great for us because we already ship with that. And yeah, so Acquia is actively talking to the Aloha people, and I'm actually trying to plan a sprint at their offices to work together on this stuff and try and make Aloha work for Drupal and vice versa. And so like TBD, but I'm pretty sure it'll end up being Aloha. But no, we're definitely not writing our own. That would be insane. Yes, no. Yes? No? Okay, I'm sorry. I'll talk to you after. Thank you, everybody.